UK Cinema History, Season 2, Episode 8, The Admirable, Crichton.
Hello, and welcome to UK Cinema History. Uh, we're gonna, while I'm waiting for people to show up, I'm just going to have my favorite J.M. Berrie quotes. Hello, hi, how are you? I guess I don't have to do those, which is good.
Hey, I'm great. I'm very excited about your choice of movie today. So very looking forward to this.
I'm excited too. I don't know if we're going to have Yazzie for this conversation today. I did beg and plead, but we'll see. If not, she sent me a bunch of notes of stuff she wants me to bring up, which I decided no. This is my way of getting her to come to these. Is no. If she wants to bring it up, she has to be here. That seems fair. Am I wrong?
Well, first I want to say hello to Nasli and to Yelena. Thank you so much for being here. If you want to come up to the stage at any point, please just raise your hand. We'd love to have you on stage. And hey, Sila, great to see you.
Good afternoon. Hi. Hello, Eric. Nice to see everyone. Yelena, of course. Natsli. Nat Natsli.
Yeah, say that 5 times really fast. I do want to start with a correction from last week, which I'd like to thank Larry from Australia for pointing this out to me. Um, that production of The Ruling Class, starring David Bowie on the West End, never existed. It was, I fell for an early form of satire. Yeah. Larry had pointed out to me, first of all, that there would have been production stills and what have you. But as I looked further, the review I was reading was by someone who called themselves the purest jurist, and it also contained reviews of a sock puppet revival of the Mikado and a version of The Sound of Music set in an all women's prison, etc., etc., etc. So my deepest apologies, and I will do better next time. But I would like to point out that when I do make mistakes, the best way of getting them corrected is if someone can point them out to me in the back channel, and I'd like to thank Larry for that. If you see it, click on my profile and just send me a note like Larry did there on Twitter, or go to our Facebook page, UK Cinema History on Facebook, and message me there. Or you can even back channel me here on Clubhouse. We will make mistakes, but we will also make corrections. So my apologies for the misinformation.
Eric, are you using a different tech than you usually do to talk? It sounds a little different.
Correct. Yes.
Oh, is it too soft?
No, it's not too
It's a little
soft.
bit staticky. It's not as clear as usually.
It's like there's a little bit of feedback. It's like it's not too soft. You're coming in um, perfectly loud, but it's not clean. If I don't have a technical background to, but it doesn't sound clean. It sounds like there's noise mixed in.
Let me try and correct that. While I'm doing that, hi, why don't we start with you? We'll go to the PTR order. First thoughts on Admiral Crichton.
Sure. So uh, this is, I mean, this is personal, but for me, one of the greatest films ever made. I love this movie. Um, when I saw it decades ago, I thought it was magic. And when I watched it again today, yeah, it's still magic. I just I think it's a really special movie, and I think that it's not better known because, in part because of how it was mishandled in the U.S. They were concerned about, because in the UK it did all right. It was the third most popular film of a year of its release in the UK. But in the US, they were concerned that the title would make Americans think that it was about a naval officer, the the Admiral Crichton, and so they changed it. But they, instead of changing it to something that would represent what it was, they called it Paradise Lagoon, and they marketed it as a sex comedy. So the trailer for the American release, this is verbatim. The trailer ends with this: the hilarious adventures of a gentleman's gentleman cast ashore on a tropic isle with four luscious, lovely, lonely dames. See how he keeps them all happy in the happiest movie of the year. So it's just this kind of lascivious uh, uh, marketing of this movie that is just wildly inappropriate for this, and just, it's like it's not the right way to market a really wonderful, brilliant movie. And by the way, the story, G.M. Barrie's play, had been adapted earlier by Paramount in 1934 as a musical called We're Not Dressing, which starred Bing Crosby as Crichton and co-starred Carol Lombard, Ethel Merman, George Burns, Gracie Allen, and Ray Milland. So it was recognized that this play was something special. And in fact, the film was turned into a musical in London in 1964. And Kenneth More played Crichton in the musical as well. So I just, it saddens me that this film isn't uh, super well known, because I just think it's an amazing piece of work. And just a few bits of trivia. It was filmed on the same beach as Mysterious Island. Um, for much of his role as Crichton, Kenneth More was filmed from the waist up to hide the fact he was wearing shorts with his dinner jacket, because it was so hot during filming. And and the musical version in London was titled Our Man Crichton. To be honest, none of the titles of this movie are great. Um, so, but I mean, for sure the worst was Paradise Lagoon. Oh, and by the way, this is the other thing I want to mention. Um, the reason on YouTube, which I think most of us watch it on YouTube, the reason all of those prints are titled Paradise Lagoon is because the original British print has apparently been lost. It doesn't seem to exist anymore. So the only print available is the American version. And thank goodness, that we at least have Paradise Lagoon, because otherwise the movie would be gone. And again, one of my favorite movies of all time. So I'm so grateful, Eric, that you picked this film. And I don't have a lot of substantive things to say about it. Hopefully, as we discuss it, something will occur to me. But those are some of the details that struck me while I was doing a little bit of research. I'm done.
I also like to point out that the print on YouTube is 1080p and is excellent. So it's not your typical old movie on YouTube that looks like they duped it off of off a videotape in the '90s. So I watched it on my full screen TV, and it looked just as good as if I'd rented it from Amazon. So, Sila, was this your first time viewing Admiral Crichton? And if so or not, what are your opening thoughts?
It was indeed my very first time. I have never heard of this film before, partly because it was created 1 year before I was born, so it was before my time, really. Um, I was, I must uh, connect to what Hai just said. It is such a, first of all, I would say Admiral Crichton from all those titles seems to me the best one. I think it's a wonderful movie. Uh, as you said before, I'm surprised, but you explained why. I'm surprised still that it's not a movie I hear about. I've never heard about this movie before. Um, it's just, uh, yes, it is a comedy, but I also saw a very, that's just my perception, considering the end, for example, very tragic, I find. It is very exquisite. It is profound. Uh, for me, like a very artfully done sociology study. And I wrote two notes that I will share as notes because I cannot keep this in my head to recite as I meant it with the way I was reading the film. The first one is once accustomed to the situation that the class distinction does not play a true role anymore, and also because the higher class cannot sustain the basics of living on an island, especially the lord becomes so willingly submissive to the governor, and also clearly full of insecurity which he had been hiding behind his position until then. But furthermore, he stays submissive to his position after they returned to their normal situation. The second one was to turn into the real self and then to be forced to leave the freedom of being the deeper self while confronting the consequences of the inner changes and adjust to the outer changes. um, I found the initial thing that made me think, although I see that a little bit differently after finishing the movie, but it struck me as quite mm, it just attracted my attention when I heard one of the men talking about the information he had read about how to start a fire. And he says, I read it, and it is the friction that does it. And the Lord answers, I'd like to meet the author. I found that somehow so trying to give us an essence of what this person is like, what he thinks he is. I just found it kind of sweet. Um, and to close, I would mention something that I see in Crichton. I see a person who is able to function but unable to stand up. Uh, this very interesting changes. They don't really evolve that much. I don't think there's a lot of time in the evolution of the two stages as I see it in the film. But those those changes show me that on one side he can function very well in any situation, but as he says to Mary while they're lying down, and I think that's key, he's afraid of losing her, but he doesn't have the um, the backbone, the nerves, the mentality to stand up for what he thinks really himself um, ought to happen or he wants to happen. And I find interesting the way he is the one who sees the ship in the horizon, and he's the one who actually stops the wedding. He could have let it go and just then once it's finished, we pay attention to the ship. But by himself cutting the ceremony because of the ship, that pretty much I think changes the end of the film. Thank you.
And and there's a lot to discuss in that set, Sila. Thank you. Is my sound any better, by the way?
Oh,
I
it's infinitely better. Whatever
Okay.
you did was
I
perfect.
I switched back to the microphone that picks up my motion too much because it's too sensitive. So we're gonna go with that. So you're gonna hear. So if I move or whatever, you're gonna hear it. So, anyhow, yeah, I was trying to overcorrect for last week, I guess. Um, I do want to start with this. This is also one of my favorite movies. I probably don't rank it as highly as High does, but I do rank it as one of my favorite films out of the 1950s for sure. But it is interesting that it's a film that but both of you don't think that is talked about a lot because I've always kind of known about this film because it was a film that back in the day was shown all the time late night on my local public television station. Like this film was on like every 6 months. And so, and it became a favorite of mine during that important point in my film going history, between the ages of 8 and 12, which I think is interesting that a film that old and with this complex a subject matter was made also at a level that could keep the interest of a person that young, especially a person like myself who, uh, uh, still to this day can't concentrate long enough to finish a jigsaw puzzle. But it is also interesting that the director, Lewis Gilbert, doesn't really get the same kind of credit for his film au revoir that a lot of filmmakers out of this era does. When you look at the diversity, I mean, this man made 3 James Bond films, one of which, For Your Eyes Only, is, for my money, the best James Bond film ever made. Definitely the best Roger Moore film. He made Educating Rita, which is, I still think to this day, Michael Caine's best performance ever on a film. He made Alfie, which is a film we're going to do as part of our series on the English kitchen sink drama social realism films. He made Sink the Bismarck, one of the great war films. And yet, if you say the name Lewis Gilbert in, like, say our sister clubhouse room understanding movies, I don't think you're going to get a lot of recognition for him. So I think he's also been under recognized for the work that he's done. But he never wrote a book about directing or the secrets of Hollywood stars, or did any of the other things to attract attention to him. But I do think, in answer to the question, why has this film not talked about that much, I think it fell into that category of films that the English, anyway, kind of felt like they outgrew, along with the Archer films when we were talking about Colonel Blimp, and was looked at for a long time as kitsch in the same way that those films were. And as we discovered when we were talking about Colonel Blimp, that that there isn't a lot of what we actually identify as kitsch, other than the time period that the film was made. In this, there's a couple of rear screen projections used where people are standing looking at a beach, and it's pretty obvious there, that these were reshoots done on a set. But other than that, I mean, this is a boilerplate, technically very good film in terms of, especially the first act of the film, the way that he films inside the mansion, and gives you the sense of the space with those nice meaty wide angle shots, cutting then to just an even meatier close up, and the use of the Panavision, of the early version of an anamorphic lens, that not quite so large as, say, a CinemaScope or something like that, but roughly 1.5 times wider than it is tall. And the way he's able to fill those frames it's a technically very, very good movie. The same way Sink the Bismarck is technically a very, very good movie. And another film that I don't think that gets talked about enough, also starring Kenneth More, that he did the year previous, Reach for the Sky, and yet we don't talk about it in those terms because of the J.M. Berrie play, which even Kenneth More, when you see him interviewed, considers to be archaic and kitschy. And when you listen to Lewis Gilbert talk about this film, he talks about how, it was popular, but it wasn't a critical success. The dialogue was maybe too corny, and what have you. And it's like, are we watching the same film? Because as Sila's analysis shows, there are so many layers to not just the dialogue and the story, but to the development of the characters in this, that I just it doesn't make any sense that this kind of just gets cradled along with the Doctor at Large films as being, a part of the kitsch era, so to speak, of English film. And yeah, I think, like the Archer films, one day this is going to have a revival. It's somebody like a Martin Scorsese did with Powell and Pressburger is just going to have to say, "Hey, I was inspired by Lewis Gilbert, and here's why you should be too," before anybody pays attention to films like this. But so those are my opening thoughts.
I mean, for me, it's the dialogue is wonderful. It's there's so many witty lines. There's so many beautiful jokes in it. And what Sila was talking about in terms of the sociological aspects of it, this is what I was saying in Sila's other room, that the comedy is a wonderful mechanism for making us see things differently, for turning things upside down, for just making us rethink and re-envision life as we think of it. And this is a beautiful example of that. You have a certain setting of what is mainstream, and then the situation changes and the roles are reversed. And but one of the beautiful things about the story is that the people who become subservient instead of being rulers are happy. They don't. They're not upset that they've changed positions. They are they're happy in their new roles because they're being more productive, and they're living maybe more according to their natures, as opposed to the randomness, random role that society assigned to them. And one of the interesting things about the story, like it or not, is that Berrie is not saying hierarchy is wrong. He's not saying do away with hierarchies. We should all be equal. He's saying that there's a place for hierarchy, but the people who are on top aren't necessarily the ones who should be on top. And in fact, more often than not, it's messed up. The people on top do not merit being on top. So it's a little bit like the message of ruling class that we did last week, which is of course why Eric made this into a kind of a double bill. And this is a very appropriate film to pair with ruling class. This is obviously a softer approach to the subject, but I think it's just as biting in its way, and just as I would, for me, more effective, because it's more layered and nuanced, and the ending is so bittersweet. As Sila said, you can see it as a tragedy, but it's not. there's nothing. There's nothing in the film that's just black and white. So you can, it's a complex film. It's not. There's nothing kitsch about it. It's really, I would say, more complex than Ruling Class, and it's hard to say, to make definitive statements about what happens in the movie. My throat's going, so I'll end it there.
And when the film begins, and you have what's his name, the MP wanting to bring equality to his staff, and preaching about equality. It's all fine and good when it's theoretical, but as soon as women ask for suffrage and his daughter is involved, all of that goes out the window, because of course now you're asking for it as a point of law. And to me, that is the theme that carries with with us all the way through the film. But I wonder, honestly, when you look at that period, I try to think of a film that is quite that daring. And as you pointed out, I think that's much more daring than the more, how shall we say, cartoonish portrait of the aristocracy in the ruling class, where it's just kind of taken for granted that we know that they're going to be buffoons. This could have so easily been another, a Wooster and Jeeves, PG Wodehouse type of comedy, but Lewis, and of course the other name that gets associated with this, Alexander Korda, who died a couple of months before the film went into production, but was owned the rights and had put Lewis and put Kenneth More into this, decided that no, we're not going to make that film. It's already been made. We're not going, that story's already been told. And the story that they do tell is unlike, I think, and this has been remade and redone a few times. Lena Wertmuller did so with Swept Away, which made it about sexual politics. In which, and then of course that was remade by Madonna and Guy Ritchie in a film I haven't seen, but these are people we don't see, you know. We don't have, you know, unlike the ruling class, which again, I, you know, if you didn't get the point that I enjoyed that film, because I think I may have sounded like I didn't like the film because of my criticism of the direction. But this, I think, is a much better film because, of course, the comedy is that kind of comedy where it's funny because it's happening, not because the director is telling you that this is the part you should laugh at, you know. But I want to welcome my fellow Georgian and near Veldostin Doc to the stage. How you doing there, Doc?
Oh, living, loving, and laughing. Um, yeah, I love this film. Um, it's such a like you couldn't make this film in current day, like wokeism, but and the one thing that it really reminds me of is they did a remake of this. I was when I was in grade school in the 80s, like in 1980, I think seven, when I was in sixth or seventh grade, they showed us this movie called The Voyage of the Mimi, and it's literally a remake of this movie without the sexual tones in it. Like it's literally like, there's a shipwreck, and like, everybody has to rebuild this ship and try to like live together, and it's kind of like a Swiss Family Robinson plus we rebuild our own escape from the island kind of thing. But it was kind of like, between Swiss Family Robinson and this, and it was like a documentary that they made for school kids in the early 80s.
But that didn't have the class struggle in it either.
No, it was completely, all zine white people for sure.
Whereas, and Hi hinted at this, unfortunately, it was before you came into the room. This film, whatever you think of its ending and whatever you think J.M. Barrie's original intent is, has its audience talking about class at the end of it, which is, I think, its only point. I don't think that Gilbert, who also adapted the screenplay from the Berrie play, is trying to make Barrie's points on film. I think he's just trying to open the conversation for us, because you can look at it as a bittersweet ending, but that pocket full of pearls is Lewis Gilbert's invention. That's not part of the original Berrie play. And if you ever want to have a torturous yet hilarious moment of aggravation, try reading Barrie's play. Just reading it, not seeing it produced, but just reading it and reading Barrie's directory notes. They are the most overblown and hilarious things. Crichton, speaking like a man who doesn't want to tell the truth but knows he needs to tell the truth, and the way he describes the sets. Dostoevsky described hell as a room with a chair. This room has five. Yeah, it can't have been an easy play to translate the film that way.
If you're going to talk about hell being a room with a chair, it would be like the way that they talk about. I think it was Socrates that said it, but Aristotle wrote it down. Like, the idea of like you're sitting in a cave looking at the wall and you see the shadows, and like you finally get out of your captivity in your chair, but you thought the shadows were like devils, and
Plato's cave.
Yeah, that was it Plato?
Yeah, it's called Plato's cave.
I always attribute it to Socrates. But I mean, they're the same, strain of philosophies. So,
Well, regarding the pearls, that scene, just when it happened, I said, "What the hell is this?" All of a sudden, we're in a different movie. That scene sticks out as not being part of a movie. It's the only scene that really sticks out that prominently as like all of a sudden it's like someone slapped me across the face with that pearl scene. It didn't feel organic to the film. It felt totally alien. And I'm curious, Eric, since you read the play, how is the ending of a play different? Because the basically the solution in the movie to give it at least even remotely a happy ending is to basically say, oh wait, there's an escape, there's an out, and that out is business. Um, if you become a businessman, you can escape the class trap because money is your out, which is interesting. And I think that Crichton has demonstrated he has what it takes to be an entrepreneur. So it's an interesting way to find a kind of a Hollywood happy ending, even though there's clearly a very dark side to it also. But I'm curious, what happens in the original play?
It does end with the carriage, with Crichton leaving, with um,
Tween.
what? Yeah, with Tween. Um, and the implication is that yes, it's the same, which is that the skills that he learned that he has on the island, he's going to put to use in business. And you have the offers from all of the other houses when he says no, I'm going to leave service. And but the difference of and this is more just a stage versus film, that the carriage has been waiting, so he's been setting this up, and his bags are already packed, and he was already going to leave, so you don't have a cut to the way that, because you can do that in film where obviously you can't do that for on stage, but the implication is more iffy, more up in the air, because he's leaving with no money. And one of the lines, there's a lot of rewriting of the lines in this, but one of the lines that gets rewritten is someone questioning, but how yes, you're a good man, but how is anybody going to know it? Which is changed for the film into the MP offering him the money to get going, and him showing him the pearls. But it's got a vaguer, and the play has a vaguer ending. But I want to also point out that I don't think we're supposed to take that scene in the film as a real happy ending. I think that's kind of the fake tacked onness of it is part of the point. Quite honestly, I don't think this is like one of those things where the studio had forced a happy ending on Gilbert, or Gilbert wanted it to end happily. I think he just wanted us to leave and discuss the merits and the issues that come up in the film, and not question what's going to happen with Crichton. Because if you're questioning what's happening with Crichton the way you do it at the end of the play, then then you're adding your worries about the character that you've come to care to what's actually the point of the film. So I think that's why he chose to do it.
Mr. Eric, may I ask you and Mr. High a question?
We wouldn't have invited you on stage if we didn't expect you to.
But I mean, we all know what a Greek tragedy is, and we know that's like 180 degrees from a Hollywood ending. And I mean, I'm a very big operatic fan, and if you were gonna take and impress a woman and take her on a date, would you want to go and take her to a movie theater or after a fancy restaurant and have her see Pretty Woman, or would you rather take her to an opera and then have a glass of wine at intermission and see Carmen? Because they're both the same story, but one is a Greek tragedy version and one has a Hollywood ending. But Carmen and Pretty Woman are the same story, but one's Hollywood. And I think that's where you're going with what you're saying, Christian is saying, is like, he was leaving it open as to not answer it whether it was a Hollywood or a Greek tragedy. It was to interpretation.
Well,
Do
of
you
course, my
agree?
answer would be Carmen.
Do you either agree or disagree? And like, where would you take your date?
Well, my answer would be Carmen because I love the music, and I think anyone that I would be dating would love the music as well. But Sila is our great opera lover here, so he'll probably tell me no, Carmen is trash, and here's why. But
Actually, that's my favorite, dude. That's my favorite. Don't pick on my favorite, please.
I'm teasing. I'm teasing Sila. I'm teasing Sila. Just Sila's a very, 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 very refined person when it comes to music. Is all was the joke of that, Doc. Sorry, but to your other point, I don't think this doesn't feel to me like a happy ending for the sake of a happy ending. But it does feel like you're just tying up all the loose ends. And to High's point, the pearls do kind of feel like a cheap way of doing that because, of course, now let's say when he is getting the oysters, you see him putting the pearls aside, and it's set up throughout the film. I think I would feel I would feel better about this ending that way because then that's what he's doing with them or what have you. But the other thing is I think we have as an audience, and I mentioned this when we were talking about Anatomy of a Fall, become more sophisticated viewers of this material than the audience in 1957. Now that's nothing against them because of course this was the audience that was making Ingmar Bergman an international hit, and Fellini with La Strada, and they are a plenty sophisticated audience. But even if you look at, compare just a decade's difference with the Persona to the Seventh Seal, and how much more sophisticated Persona is, or say 8.5, even 8 years later to La Strada, audiences get more sophisticated, and we as an audience probably, those pearls feel kind of. I've seen this before, and and they feel kind of. What's the phrase? Deus ex machina. Is that and highway? Is that how they kind of feel to you? Like a cheap kind of,
The day of the
They're,
machines.
they're exactly what I said. It feels like it was inserted externally. It doesn't feel organic. It doesn't feel like anything that came before or what came after. It feels artificially inserted to create a happy Hollywood happy ending, as opposed to having people grapple with something a lot darker. Again, the ending is, as Sila said, the ending. There's a tragedy to it, but it's kind of up to us to decide how much of a tragedy. Because I could argue if the woman he almost married on the island really loved him, then she would have fought to be with him because it is her choice. Um, Now, he said no, but she didn't fight that hard. If she said, look, um, it's my life and I don't care what society says, we'll weather through it. Um, and his saying, he didn't even say society. Interesting choice of words in the movie. He says, we can't fight civilization. So it didn't say society, but civilization. So that's a very interesting choice of wording. It made me think a little bit of Guess Who's Coming to Dinner, where, that's about a mixed marriage and the same arguments. But I mean, it's largely the same arguments, which is you can't marry because you'll encounter all these disapproval from other people and societal pressures to do from being different from the mainstream. And their response was, "Well, we love each other, so we'll deal with it." And
Yeah,
she could have
but
said that,
yeah,
but
but
she didn't.
the idea high is like, you know, Brent, what is her name? Brenna Howe, Howe. Like, you know, when she jumps off the like the cliff into the water to go like dive in, you know, that wasn't her. That was a stunt double. I want to date the stunt double. I don't want to date the actress.
So, but the thing is, he chose her. He could have chosen Tween, but on the island, but he didn't choose Tween. He chose her. So there's a question of who were they, was one of them being inauthentic? Were both of them being inauthentic? Were they just making, did he make a choice based on the circumstances? And then the circumstances changed, and so he made another choice. That's a very pragmatic kind of way of approaching marriage, as opposed to, this is my soulmate, this is who I love, and who I'll be with no matter what the circumstances. The wedding vows are, for rich or for poor, the wedding vows are, no matter what, we're going to be together. But he essentially flipped with the new circumstances. Now, you can look at it as he was self-sacrificing. In fact, everything he does from the moment he sees a ship can be seen as self-sacrificing, kind of Christ-like. He gives up his position and his power for the sake of a people that he is governing. Um, but you could also see it as his choice of women being variable depending on circumstance. So
Well,
there's
which was first, Lord of the Flies or this?
Oh, this by a long shot, by 70, 80 years. Oh,
So
the
so
original,
so so
the novel by William Golding.
Lord of the Flies is a spinoff of this then.
Well, Golding actually refers to Admiral Crichton in the novel version of Lord of the Flies. So definitely yes.
I I would like to add something to this because my head is bursting with a lot of things going on with the last few minutes. First of all, if I remember correctly, I think that jumped at me right away that when Crichton intercepts himself by watching the ship, the moment he does that is when he's about to say in poverty, when he's telling the vows. Something that is where it is cut. Um, in terms of, and I'm connecting this whole thing. That's why I'm jumping to different ones, but it has to do with one thing: the aspect of which person is watching the film to see it as a tragedy or as a wonderful Hollywood ending. To me, the whole thing turns around equality does not exist. The two that marry are the only ones who were not from the class. I believe, and I said that from the beginning of the room, I think Crichton was very, very able to function in all kinds of situations. I mean, he managed everything. But when it came to stand up, he couldn't do that. And I think that's a sign of the pearls, even though I agree 100% that it looked like injected from somewhere else, that scene.
Well, doesn't
But,
that mean every man has his own weakness?
well, I'm not going that way, but I'm just, I, I really believe, or the way I read it, he was really in love with that woman. with Mary, and Mary was in love with him. Um, and like I said, she wanted, even when she finished playing the piano, she in the house, in the mansion, she kept alluding to that. Let's try it. Let's stay together. He couldn't stand to that. He couldn't. He can. Um, but also another question. One question I had. What? First of all, I find very interesting that they are having this equality exercise just before the moment comes to exercise it in real life. But my question is, what what was the reason that the Lord decided to have this exercise? Why? What compelled him to, to, to do that? Where the girls were completely against it. And I'm so convinced of the character of this woman who was one of the most against equality, but one once they were stripped of their positions, and I think in the back of their minds, perhaps only Crichton and perhaps Tweeny, perhaps, but I think it was only Crichton who was really 1 foot on the island and 1 foot outside. The rest of them were all kind of okay. This is life. They're choosing a woman. They're making plans. They're. To me, they all stayed there. He was the only one who had a foot outside.
But when Mary says to him, "Why did you do that? We could have been happy here." He says, Did you see their faces?" I think that's a critical line in the movie. He said when he lights the fire, he said, "Did you see their faces?" So what he's saying is, in their heart of hearts, there was at least a significant portion of his population who really missed England and wanted to go back home. And it's what he's providing is a freedom of choice. If he hadn't lit that fire, then he would be essentially imprisoning them. This way, he's giving them a choice. And no one chose to stay behind on the island. And, as was said later, she said, we could go back to the island. So what he provided was the ability to choose. And, I think that's right. I think otherwise he's a dictator. So I think he did the right thing. Uh, as as uh, as complex as the ramifications of that was, I think that he made the honorable choice, the admirable choice.
Well, first, I want to talk about what Kathy brought up in the comments, and thank you for that, Kathy. We understand people aren't always in a place where they can speak, and thank you for adding to the conversation in the comments. I'm going to read it out loud. The hesitation is usually occurring when the decision he makes to accept someone as equal, that is putting his social reputation at risk, compared to treating his staff with fairness, that's a benefit for a strong working household. I want to stretch that out and ask the question, though, because Crichton is of a class that he calls himself the son of a butler and a lady maid, the happiest of all combinations, and he says that the line I wrote down, and I may have gotten this wrong, but to me the most beautiful thing in the world is a haughty English aristocratic home with everyone kept in its place. So when he accepts Lady Mary, I don't think he's looking at that as he is elevating himself or degrading herself. Because he is saying there is a difference in class, but not a superiority in class, and that to some extent, my interpretation, and of course this is after several viewings, is that in a way, Crichton looks down on this aristocratic class the same way we laugh at a Wooster and Jeeves, and we constantly look at Jeeves as you know, as the smart go-getter who gets the English twit out of trouble time and time again. And I think the same way Tweenie becomes, because of her practical experience, the most attractive woman on the island to the men on the island. Crichton, when he has his choice of who on the island to choose, is not making that on a class distinction. But when that is interrupted, he realizes that his job, and to quote again Kathy's wonderful comment, the benefit of a strong working household, his job was to get them off that island. That was his duty, and he chose that duty. But to Highest point, then what were his actual feelings for Mary, who, by the way, was played by Sally Ann Howes, who, I'm going to defend my gal a bit to what Doc was saying about not wanting to date the actress.
I wanted to date the girl that jumped off the cliff.
That's her. That's Sally Ann Howes.
Right, she actually did that herself.
Oh! You want to date the stunt woman? I got you.
I want to date the girl that jumped off the cliff. In that one scene where she jumped off the side of the ledge.
Well, I in a way, I couldn't date Sally Ann Howes because I feel like I've grown up with her. Because the first time I remember her was in Dead of Night, where of course she played the teenage girl who tells the ghost story about the children in the first legitimate episode. But the other reason is, of course, I having raised children and seen Chitty Chitty Bang Bang a million times, she'll always be simply scrumptious to me. And so unfortunately I have a mental block, but I think she's an absolutely beautiful woman. And one of the benefits of this film is that you get to see quite a bit of her.
What's the bed knobs on the bed? Dude, on the bed, like bed knobs.
Bed knobs and broomsticks?
Yeah, there you go. Like, we need to do that next week.
No, we're not doing bed knobs and broomsticks, but thank you for the suggestion, Doc, and keep them coming. But yeah.
No, but when you bring up Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, you throwing me back in that generation.
Yeah, we're not doing Chitty Chitty Bang Bang either. Anyway. But no, but back to Kathy points out that yes, that Jessica Fletcher, that was what's her name, the Manchurian Candidate woman, was in bed. But getting back on subject and back to what Kathy was saying. So my interpretation of this film, when it comes to its message about class, is that class distinctions are real, but that you can't put a value judgment on those class distinctions. So the lesson that the Lord learns from having seen the turnaround on the island, how nature, how he becomes the servant to the master, which kind of the flip of Robinson Crusoe was he leaves the Whig Party and becomes a conservative Tory, to which Crichton's response is, oh, congratulations, like, finally, sir, you've gotten rid of all these stupid ideas about eliminating class divisions. And I think Crichton has a great scene when the Lord demands the once a month where the servants all sit down with the aristocracy, where he seems less embarrassed of the behavior of the servants, except for the three that come strolling in that he closes the door on, towards their masters, and more embarrassed about the masters and their behavior towards the servants, and the ideas that the servants are going to give, and that, or the scene where he fires the lad for calling him Crichton and says, in 15 years you may gain a rank where you can call me Mr. Crichton, and then it's followed up with that great line, when he's asked about equality, and he says, if that means that I'm going to have to be equal with the scullery maiden, I don't want any part of it. And so again, yeah, these are class distinctions, but not value judgment class distinctions. These are this is the class that does this, and when you are put into nature, you are still going to have a natural aristocracy, but the values change, and as your values change, the people who fill those roles are filling different roles. So when Crichton spots that ship, his role has changed, because he is a man who has for the 2 years that they've been on this island, been doing his job, keeping these people alive, and to do that job, he had to become the leader. And then when the ship comes, his job is to get them off the island. So that was my take. That's how I interpreted the film.
Yeah, and it's a great interpretation. And it's much like Castaway. If you wanted to make a modern version of it and make it and make it a new story, take Tom Hanks and that movie, mash them together, and make it where like you and I, you're the Lord and I'm your butler. And then I take being a butler very and actually as a son, actually a great grandson of a butler, I take pride in that, and I'm a soldier, and my grandparent that was a butler was a soldier. But if we were on a cruise and I was your butler, and somehow the ship got popped off, and it ended up being me stuck alone on an island, you know I'm the one that was a Boy Scout. I was the one that was in the military. I'm the one that knows how to make fresh water out of seawater.
Well, you're a
I'm the
medic
one.
too, aren't you, Doc?
Yeah, and
So yeah, I mean, yes, if anybody gets sick, who are they going to turn to?
But you're the Lord. It's just you and me. You're the Lord, and then I have all the knowledge that I have. What is the hierarchy in that position when it's just you and me? When you don't even know how to start a fire?
By the way, it's Angela Lansbury. I can't believe the brain burps I get on Clubhouse. Angela Lansbury, of course, yes. But yeah, no, and Doc, you raise a good point. But the other thing is, most of these class distinction films fall into what I call the lions led by donkeys trope, which is, of course, that Paths of Glory is the Stanley Kubrick film, is a perfect example, where you have the brave infantryman who's braver, the man who goes out and does his job despite the fact that he doesn't want to and he's afraid of getting shot, or the general safe back in his headquarters who orders them to. And this film avoids that completely. Yes, the aristocracy are twits, but that's their job to be twits. Yes.
Dude,
Oh, go ahead.
But you can't go there. As a medic, I mean, I've watched fellow soldier medics, like we didn't get there was somebody shot in the middle of the street from a sniper, and then the medic ran out there to go grab the guy, and we didn't have the scene secure. And then they only wounded the first guy in the leg because they wanted the medic to run out there and grab him so they could shoot the medic. And we learned really quickly how to secure the scene before. Dude, I've had to run out in the middle of the street and grab people a bunch of times, but I never did it. Well, I mean, I actually did one time when there was rounds bouncing around me, but I mean, I was on an adrenaline rush and I was scared for my buddy. But I mean, but the idea that, dude, when you go through that and then I still end up becoming your butler and you have the hierarchy within this movie, and then, and I get what you mean by, you like, if I would have been on that island, I would have been if I wasn't a leader, I'd have been a lieutenant within that community. And then, but when the ship shows up at the end, and you're like, holy shit, now everything goes back to the way it used to be, and now you're the lord again. So there is no real definitive conclusion, but like you said, there's a lot of understanding that you gain through like the whole time on the island, because you took the hierarchy out of it, and it was like who knew how to do what, who was useful in a certain kind of way. And then, but when you go back to society, you can apply what you learned from the island into modern society. So, I mean, I do get that.
Cami, welcome to the room. And if you want to join the stage at any point, please feel encouraged to raise your hand. Sila, you've been quiet. I'd love to hear more from you. You said your head was exploding, so I'd love to hear more explosions.
Thank you. The one of the things that I want to mention, not to say that it has been uh, overlooked in the room, but I just want to make it a point because to me it has been a very important point for many years. I believe equality is an illusion. Equality does not exist, and it should not exist. What do we do with the different classes, with the different levels of society? We can just treat them respectfully, but they are not equal. A woman can never be equal with me. I can never, and I don't want to be equal with a woman. I don't want to be equal with a person from Africa. I don't want to be equal with the Chinese. I am me, and we are going to be different. And the dynamic of how do we enhance each other, among others, through our differences. For me, that was one of the key things of the film. In the situation in the mansion, of course, the butler is responsible for that, and the Lord is the Lord. Then again, when we go into the wild, to the wilderness, interestingly enough, it stayed the same. The butler stayed the one in charge. In the house, he was also the one in charge. Yes, the house belongs to the Lord. He's the one who has the power. But the one who really exercises the power, as Alan Watts used to say, when you have
Oh,
power,
no, you didn't.
when you have power and you give orders, then you're giving away your power. So I just that's one of the things that was in my head. First of all, to mention that with
Dude, I
equality,
love Alan Watts, by the way.
the aspect with equality, and I think in the film, in a very interesting way, like Eric said, one of the situations where you see abuse is coming from Crichton towards the were they farmers or the three men that were a little bit poor looking, quite
Stable hands.
okay.
They minded the horses.
Yeah. So that's one of the situations where I saw a very, very clear example of abuse or I am better than you. He was not just protecting the house, he was embarrassed. In the same way, like you mentioned, he was saying, you call me Mr. Crichton. There was something on that aspect, there was
No,
something of,
maybe in 15 years you may call me
yeah.
Mr. Crichton. Even worse.
So he was very, very adamant in showing um, more than showing that he disliked aristocracy. He was, I think, it's a natural thing of animals, and we are animals. I have seen Polish women, I have seen Turkish women, I have seen, well, I just said women, but different individuals in Europe mistreating people from their own country because they are new to the system. So when a person is in Germany and has arrived, has left his whichever country that is and has a good position, they will mistreat the person from their own country when they come new to the other country. So this is again addressing the abuse that we exercise, which has nothing to do with class. It's just I think I'm better than you. And of course that was one of the conflicts of the girls with when the experiment was announced. How can we do that? We can't do that. So yeah, that I'm just going around in circles right now, but that's what I wanted to mention.
So, the one of the things that we see in the film is that the people who are ruling, we don't see them doing anything. Crichton and his staff are running the house. We don't see what the Lord actually does outside of a house. So it's not clear what function he has, if any, other than to boss people, other than to kind of seem to make decisions, except Crichton ends up making his decisions for him. So it's all a show. So in that sense, um, what happens on the island isn't so much a role reversal as it is a stripping away of falsehood, um, because the people who actually get things done are like Crichton primarily. He's running that house, and so when they get to the island, he runs the island. It's just with a stripping the pretext that anyone other than him is running that house. What's missing in the story is what exactly do these people do besides get served by the servants? So presumably, they have some kind of function in society, but we never see it. So, yeah, go ahead, Eric.
Well, Lord Loam is a member of Parliament, and so he is doing what his job was. In 1905, a member of Parliament's job was to keep up appearances and to keep a big house. That was literally what they did for a living.
Yeah, that is part of the conversation he's having with Tenny when they're alone in peeling potatoes, and they're reminiscing of what they know in London, and he mentions that. So that's the only clue that I got from the film about what he does.
Well,
Well,
I would ask, like, what if the island is nothing more than a metaphor, and you apply the same story to the movie called Four Feathers with Heath Ledger, in order to maintain his father's house,
that is
but because
absolute blasphemy, Doc. I will not put up with Four Feathers being referred to as that movie with Heath Ledger when Alexander Korda has made a wonderful film that with Michael fucking Redgrave, who is a walking god on earth. And I miss Heath Ledger to death. He is not fit to carry Michael Redgrave's goddamn jockstrap.
Do some yoga, Eric.
I only get worked up about important things. You know this, Sila.
well, I meant
So
I just
to
meant
get
the
to get
I
to
just
get
meant I
back to
just
the
meant the
point of
idea
what we
I
were,
just meant the
Doc, to
idea
get back to the
I meant
point
to
of
the
what we were
idea of the
talking about.
story, like, because it's a matter of, like, maintaining one's, like, honor for one's house. And, like, when he got the feathers in the book, in the story, the idea that he went to go rescue, like, he didn't join the military because he didn't want to leave, his old lady, but then she dismissed him because he refused his commission. But I mean, the island as a metaphor, is literally like, what is your commission in life? What do you bring to life? What do you do to life? Are you just the Lord, or are you the butler? And I think that has a lot to do with character development. And
Wow,
that's and that
that is an amazing ramble that said virtually nothing. Um, I'm trying to get at a question here of roles. The the so in Are we supposed to think that the people ruling the house are not supposed to have a function except to put up appearances, like the Queen of England, or is Crichton becoming a businessman? I mean, that is a useful function in society. Is is that Would it be better if they were also businessmen? Or, I mean, eventually, the logical culmination of his going into business is eventually he'll be successful. He'll have his own house. And then is he going to hire his own servants? And is he going to treat them the way the Lord treated him? Is he going to reestablish that same hierarchy?
well,
Or,
that is community commerce.
Well, that's a question we could ask today, but not in 1905 when this takes place, because
Community has always
we
been commerce. It's a trade. It's a trade for a trade. It's always been commerce.
because we're talking about a family that would look at actually doing something or contributing to society as actually being vulgar, in that time period, that's when. And it's a very interesting scene that it kind of flies by, and it might might blink had struck for women's suffrage, is attempting to manipulate things so that Lord Blume will run the island, and trying to undercut Crichton at the beginning. And then in one of the cleverer things, and this is also true of the play, it simply cuts to 2 years later to show Crichton in charge. So we don't actually see that taking place. You see the statue unveiling in the film so that you know that the time has passed. And then they're talking about the governor, and the governor turns out to be Crichton. And Mary has accepted that as the natural order of things. So as much as she fights for women's suffrage and a reality, but at that particular time, she's still tied into her class. And so when Crichton makes the decision to get them off the island and they return to those roles, that makes it that much easier for her to return to the person who said, "Listen, Dad, you have to be in charge because the aristocracy is in charge. Stop letting Crichton run things." And of course, the way that Crichton does that initially is by cooking pork chops, and which I thought was a great metaphor because of my love of pork chops. Like I think I might have made him my leader as well.
one other thing I'll mention is the the one function that they do take on when they come back is to lie their heads off. And they do that very successfully. So the most egregious example is a guy who writes a book about their exploits, where Crichton gets a page, and he makes them all out to be heroes, and it's a totally fallacious account of what happened on the island. And he doesn't even like apparently doesn't even have a conversation with Crichton to say, "Hey, I'm going to do this. Are you okay with it? Um, will you stand by this?" I mean, just goes ahead and does it, and he hopes Crichton won't read it. I mean, the the level of
I've had, dude,
I'm
but
still talking, Doc.
yes, sir. I'm sorry.
The level of privilege to do that is mind-boggling. So is Berrie saying that these rulers, their main job is to, as Eric said, to put on appearance and to lie through their teeth, um, and that they have no other really useful function? And ruling class, you have much the same idea, except he goes a step further and says their function is to serve Satan, pretty much, and to make other people's lives miserable. Um, so I'm just, uh, it's such a, there's so many layers here. But anyway, those are my thoughts for now. I'll be quiet for a while.
I'm sorry that I interrupted you. But you made me think about, like, my military career in Iraq. I've done over 600 dismounted missions. I've done a lot of stuff in my life, but I've been with people that I served with, and they've written books since I've been back, and I've read their books, and I know that they're talking out of their bunghole, and I can prove it because I have the evidence. Because I used to have a little Tony Hawk skateboard camera that you can mount to your skateboard helmet, and I attached it to my combat helmet, and I have hours and hours and hours of video that I can prove that these people are talking dumb stuff. But I'm not going to call them out by name, and I'm not going to disrespect their hustle. I know they're full of shit, but I mean, I think it's much like what you're talking about. Like, once you realize these people are full of shit, do you call them out by it, or you just let it rock? And I think that's, for me, I just have to let it rock because I don't want to call them out by it. And I think that's where you're trying to get to. Like, where is that? What kind of person are you? Would you call them out, or you let it rock?
Well, and another thing that I capture by what you're discussing right now is not just what happens in the film, the story as I see it, but what it tells me it's going to happen. And that is that through this transition that everyone went through, including the what was her name, the big lady who challenged them to say the truth.
Lady of Brocklehurst,
Yeah,
my favorite
she was
character.
she was one of the dynamics in the film that that catapults the whole thing forward. And so it's not only what I see in the film, but the fact that according to what the end is, uh, things have changed. They can no longer be what they used to be. The Lord is shaken up. He's trying to hold himself, but he has a very difficult time keeping up with his appearances. His daughter Mary is going to be troubled for the rest of her life. So I like to take the idea of the film not only into what I read and enjoy in the film, but the dynamic that it has set for the for what's coming as a symbol, if you could say that, for what I see in as criticism of what they're talking about. But I don't think that I understood an answer. I don't know if there was one as to, because I think that's, for me, is very interesting or important. What led the Lord to start the experiment in the first place? Why did he want to make that experiment?
Kicks. That's the only answer I've come up with. And there, you won't find the answer in the play either. But I do have I want to get back to what Doc was saying about Crichton covering for George after George writes the book. There is something in the play that's not in the film, which is that George is given all these really stupid idioms that he creates. And one of the early ways that Crichton establishes dominance is every time George comes up with an idiom, under Lord Loam's direction, dunks his head in a bucket of water. And then there's a discussion 2 years later where George is bragging that Crichton hasn't had to dunk his head in a bucket of water in 4 months, and so he seems to have been a better man. So then when they return to civilization, so to speak, they decorate the mansion with on the walls a lot of the souvenirs of what they got on the island, heads of animals, etc. And one of the things that they hang up is that bucket. And when Crichton goes to confront George after having read his book, George just instinctively grabs the bucket and hands it to Crichton, expecting him to get his head dunked. And he said, I'm sorry, I forgot for a moment we weren't on the island, which, I don't know how well that would have gone cinematically, and it's probably a good thing to have cut out, because it keeps this film under, around that perfect, I think, 90-minute mark. But it does kind of give an interesting illumination to what Doc was talking about.
I mean, it's all, dude. I always start, me as a medic. I'm gonna always start with Maslow's like human needs theory. Like, you can only live a couple minutes without air. You can only live a couple days without water. You can live a couple days, like weeks without food. It does you no good to build a house on the side of a fucking volcano. So you need safety and security fourth after food, and then after you get safety and security, then you can build a house. And then you can, like, after you get a house, you can start to like self-actualize and like build a garden and like cultivate. Like, my brain goes to like the hierarchy of needs. And on an island, I think that my brain would be, as a butler, more needful than the Lord's, because I'm pretty sure that he doesn't know how to start a fire, let alone how to build,
Well, we see that
anything.
they show him trying to start a fire and unable to.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. But it's that hierarchical of needs, and with somebody like me that in my real life, I feel like I would be the butler in that scenario if it was 1905, but it's not. It's 2024. But in 1905, Brian, me, and Doc, I would be a butler. Dude, and I would be a proud butler, because that was a really good job.
Well, the position of the butler, at least as far as I am aware of it, has always been a very, very highly respected job, and in part because they are very, very, very knowledgeable people, and so, and I don't think that has changed, even in the United States, where we don't really. That's not a tradition here. At least it doesn't
No,
come
no.
from.
In 2024, Brian, right here, this guy, Doc, I would be a butler, and I would be proud to be one.
Well, and as Kathy points out, the butler always sees everything. And that's a trope, isn't it? In English literature, the butler saw what the butler saw. The butler is the all-knowing butler, one that the ruling class, the film The Ruling Class, kind of turns on its head with their version of the butler, who is this secret socialist who who drinks it is so contemptuous of his of the so-called ruling class that he can't bring himself to even do his own job. He has no pride in what he does, which give me those two versions even though I think the ruling class has a much more sophisticated view of society, I think this film has a much more sophisticated view of character and the characters that it builds. I think Crichton is a much more realistic version of a butler than the one in the ruling class.
You, I cannot answer I cannot answer the question or the idea of what I gather altogether from the film as a convincible statement. I don't think I can come up with that, but I strongly feel that if there's one character that developed throughout the film and became more of its core, that was Mary. To me, that she is the only one that really is given, because her sisters are given no space to develop anything. They're just sisters. But from Crichton, from Tinny, from the Lord, from everyone involved, I find she's the only one that has been given the space to develop, not necessarily from bad to good or good to bad, but just to develop and really grow out of the situation.
To have an actual character arc.
Yes, yes.
And it is interesting that when she arcs all the way back, there is a part of her that is angry at Crichton for not going through with because, and this isn't said explicitly, but in my interpretation, she feels like he has chosen society over her. And that's where that hurt seems to come from. That was how I interpreted the scene. But, if anybody's got a different interpretation of it, I'd be glad to listen. But the amount of pain that she feels and that we feel for her in that moment, there is there feels like Crichton has chosen the butler's life and the society over her and their relationship.
But
Yes,
he
yes,
doesn't
because
choose.
Well, no,
I'm
but
sorry.
He
I
doesn't
might
choose.
ask.
I just want to say he doesn't choose the butler's life. He leaves the butler's life, which is why it's Crichton who has the biggest arc, because he's the one who. I mean, his entire life was being a butler. It wasn't just a profession; it was who he was. And he leaves at the end of a movie. He leaves that role that he was so expert at to do something entirely new. So, and that's huge for him. It's not huge for us. We're used to thinking that way, but for him and the way he was brought up, the way the slightest deviation from the proper way of doing things was considered like a crime. For him, for him to just leave the role of butler and do something new, that I mean, it's hard for us to feel it because in America we're brought up to think that way. But for him, that was an incredible transformation. I mean, Mary is still in that society. She's still going to marry the guy who she doesn't even love. So I would say she hasn't changed so much as she's going to live with a sorrow now for her life that she didn't have before. But she's going to go ahead and go through with it. But he's leaving them all. So I think that he makes a profound change in the film, and that's part of what the movie is about. Is that profound change that he makes, and in a way, it's a message to all of us. I mean, I think one of the points of the film is when you watch this, it's like, however you think you're stuck, you feel you were born a certain way, you're expected to do certain things. Screw all that. Pay attention to who you really are. Listen to your inner self, and follow that because you can do anything. Um, be respectful of the skills and talents and passions that you were born with, and follow that, not what anybody tells you that you should be. And that makes the film a universal film that is applicable to anybody.
The reason I said that is because in terms of Crichton, it really bothers me, and that's why I call it a tragedy, among other things, among other reasons, because he decides to go with Tinny, and I don't think that that's his. For me, that's a substitute. I think he showed the real level of interest, the real level of love to Mary at the beach. Well, when they were lying on the sand, and um, yes, he has decided to stop being a butler, but and in terms of that, yes, he has changed. But uh, I was just referring to the fact that he doesn't go, and what I have said from the beginning, he does not stand to what he wants, to what he is, because I think he's being sincere when he says, "I am afraid," and she says, "Of what? Of losing you." So in that sense, you're right, Eric, to say that he chose society over her because he has already confessed to her, "I am afraid of losing you." And then he says, "Okay, no, we cannot be together." To me, it makes no sense.
Sorry, my screen froze up there. Always a glitch somewhere. Um, the other question I have, and then I'm going to start working on closing the room because we did actually go longer than the film, but that's because this is a nice short film. But we grew up in a meritocracy, most of us anyway, or at least we're observing this from a meritocracy. Uh, I wonder how we would have viewed Crichton's ending if we had grown up in something less meritocratic, where you are much more, where it's much more important how and when you were born, or how and to whom you were born. Then I mean that's what military promotions were based on in England all the way through World War I, and but I just kind of go around the panel, but just kind of putting ourselves in that shoes. Is Crichton's ending and is the ending of this film take on a different tone if you're not looking at it from the lens of someplace like the United States that's more bootstrap driven than England was in 1905?
That's why I called it at the beginning a social study, because I don't focus myself onto what our system is in Europe or the system in the United States or the system in Japan, which are in Japan is extremely uh, also in terms of uh, I'm supposed to do this and what I'm supposed to do, and that's what my grandchildren are supposed to do. Period. Um, I lost my track of thought, so I will give it up now.
It was a good train, though. It was a good train, though. But yeah, I guess my question would be the difference in time between when J. Berrie wrote this in 1905 and when the film was made in 1957, and then you look at the difference in time between now and 1957. If we were to make a film about uh, uh, the mores of 1957, we'd be looking at it in a completely different light. But I wonder, because this was a lot more popular in England, as High pointed out, it was marketed very badly here, as and just a terrible American title. But I wonder if even in 1957, if there was enough of that class system that if you go to England today, you can still see parts of it that we as Americans aren't quite as adapt to or didn't pick up on. And I'm going to turn first to Kathy. Thank you for joining the stage, and we've really appreciated your comments in the written part of the comments as well.
I just put that an example of something that is going on now, that is the pressure of the higher societies. They still view themselves as a level of, they're above everyone, they're special, they're a pedigree. And the example at the minute is Harry and Meghan. So the media are being swayed to make them out to be like, I don't know, because they've done nothing wrong. They've just left what was tradition. Yeah, so that's like an example, because it does happen like in high societies, like you know, if you were to marry down or things like that, the family don't believe that, the pedigree um of the bloodlines would carry on. It's crazy.
I'm trying to remember, Kathy, were you here last week when we were talking about the ruling class?
No, I was here like maybe 2 weeks ago.
Yeah. Okay. So it was I don't even remember what film we did 2 weeks ago. But one of the things that we talked about in the ruling class is something that we talk about here in America a lot. When Prince Harry goes on Oprah and what have you, that you're going to hear some people, not me, but some people say, what the fuck do I care that about these people who are going to be the first heads against the wall when the revolution comes? What the fuck is this fixation with royalty in England?
Well, it's because he's speaking out in a more vocal way about, well, things that they're not allowed to talk about.
like
So they
like
wouldn't
cocaine
openly
abuse.
speak. Well, yeah, or well, there's that going on. So all he's done is he doesn't like what Andrew has found out to be done. Plus, there's loads of other things that he probably knows about. Um, and he doesn't want to accept that behaviour anymore. Every time they speak, they have to have people approving all of that. Their life is monitored.
Is anyone else having trouble hearing her? I think you've gone in the matrix, Kathy.
Yeah, exactly. You're in the
I
matrix.
think he's got more public for his own
Kathy,
safety, to
stop
be
talking. You're in the
honest,
matrix.
because
Like
of what
you,
happened to
dude.
his mum
You're a whole dude.
when
We can't hear
she
you. We
didn't
can't hear you. We can't hear you. Like you're in the matrix, girl.
Well, she can't hear us as well. As someone who's been in the matrix, unfortunately, you keep going because because you don't know. But yeah, I think that's an interesting parallel. But then by and this just occurred to me. So if it's way off base, I haven't given it a lot of thought. By abandoning his role as a butler, isn't Crichton in a way turning his back on his class?
Well, I mean, he's turning his back on the hierarchical system in the sense that he's no longer comfortable with his role in it. But he's if someone he, he doesn't feel comfortable anymore in playing the role of butler because
Yeah,
he's been.
but hi. Do you know what it takes to become a butler? That like you know you
Well,
have to learn like
that's why I said it's
all the
huge.
forks go on the left, the fork, I mean the knife goes in the middle, and then the spoons are on the right. You have the like little like
Yeah, but
little
that's what I
shrimp fork at the
said.
top, the
I get your
sorbet,
point. You don't have to keep
like
going. Uh, but
Yeah, that's exactly what he said, Doc.
yeah, it's exactly what I
It's a
said.
skilled
The
position. It's a very skilled position.
yeah.
It's
Well, but
more than
I'm
that.
saying like, but
It's his very
you get taught
excuse me.
see
It's
one,
his
two, one,
very
teach one.
it's his very identity. It's not just a job for him. It's who he is. Um, the way more so than most other professions, because he gets up in the morning. He's a butler. He's butler throughout the day until he puts his the rulers of a house to bed. And I mean, he's a butler every second of every day. It's who he is. It's his identity, and it's the way he's treated by others. So it's not like when one of us might say, I'm quitting my job and I'm going to find another job. It's much more profound than that. So for him to leave not just that house, but leaving being a butler, it's an enormous shift for him. That's why I'm saying his arc is profound in the context of who he is. It doesn't seem as profound to us because, as Eric said, we live in a meritocracy for the most part. Though, you could also make an argument that for we live in our own class-based hierarchy where you have this very, very rich, like, I don't know, 1% or something that owns 80% of the country, something incredibly skewed like that. It's not precise, but there's this huge gap between the wealthy and the not wealthy in this country. So we do have our own form of ruling class that's based more on money than on birthright. But of course, because of inheritance, there's a certain amount of birthright going on in this country as well. So we're not that far removed from a story. As to Eric, your question about the UK, yeah, the UK, as Kathy I think would have said more about if she didn't have the technical difficulties, that the UK has been incredibly class based for centuries and centuries. 1957 still a very strong class class hierarchy in place, and it's still there today. It's not as maybe as severe as it was in 1957, but in 57 it was a huge deal, and that's part of why this was a number 3 film of the year in the UK. But again, I want to, as I said, I'll repeat. I think that if you just pull back a little bit and see this as metaphorical, the message of this movie is relatable to anybody in any culture because the broader message is never mind what people tell you about who you should be, never mind about how you were born, where you were born. Listen to your inner self and follow the path of your inner self to find your true self and your true path. And don't let anybody tell you what that is. And don't get stuck in some path that isn't authentic to who you are. And I think that's part of the beauty of the film. But also, at the same time, when he's taking a path where he can be authentic to himself, the people in the house have taken the absolute opposite path of total inauthentic, inauthenticity. So they actually are actively living a lie when they come back. What did they learn from being on the island? Apparently nothing. Because, as Mary said, he made them into full human beings. And then they went back and became shells of human beings again. Because if you're telling lies about yourself, how does that make you feel? How does that make you uh, endure the day? So the fact that they're actively living lies for the rest of their lives about what happened, that's like being like being prisoners of their own making. So he's leaving a kind of a hell that they've created for themselves. And part of a tragedy, we're talking about, Sila's talking about the tragedy in terms of Crichton and the two women who were love interests. But another tragedy are those lords and ladies who are going to live miserable, pampered and wealthy, but on a spiritual level, miserable lives for the rest of their lives because of this choice they made to live lies instead of seeking their authentic selves. So that's part of, I think, the real tragedy. And again, a very powerful message for anyone to, choose the authentic path and not the false path.
If I had nothing else to do, I would make a sequel and have Crichton suddenly change his mind, bring the tinny back, and go away with Mary. That's what I would do if I had nothing else to do and make a sequel.
Be a much more satisfying film by today's standards, for sure.
Well, I think
I
it's
was
more
going to save
sincere.
this
I think it's more sincere.
sincere and satisfying, but I was going to save this for the ending line because I thought it would be funny, but it just really goes with what Hai was saying. But it's when Mary and is asking Crichton, why he gave it all up. And he says I won't, and says she won't let him go. The line is. You loved someone called the governor. He does not exist anymore. You're Lady Mary, and it's time for you to say goodnight to Crichton, your butler. And to me, that's the other theme of the film, which is, of course, that the governor was a role that he was playing on that island because of that was how things had to get done. And when it was time for him to stop playing that role, he had to change his roles. But because of what happened on that island, he could no longer, to Hai's point, return to his original life because it would become a hollowed out shell, as he pointed out, because he would be trapped in that same lie and that same and living that same existence as the people that he was serving.
Well, the thing that just occurred to me is that actually he has begun the whole engine to function. He has started the whole thing, everything. But what surprised me was this sudden change where he's the governor and he's being served. As of that point, he was actually doing nothing. Everybody was working. Everybody had their things to do, but only he was not working. So I found that also very interesting that he went to that position where that's not his mentality, that's not in his blood, uh, and he was that I found a little bit confusing as to why suddenly he does nothing.
Well, he explains that. That's his role in nature. I'm sorry, Kathy. Are your technical difficulties
I
fixed?
hope so. I was just going to say, in those positions, I know of cases like in so many books and films and documentation, while they're in that world of being told what to do before they can make that decision, it's probably like, that, well, I'm going to wait for instruction first, or do I take my position of tradition? A bit like the musicians on the Titanic.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. Or in the military, the chain of command. You have to go up the chain of command. But that line you love someone called the governor, really speaks to me. That the governor doesn't exist anymore because he was a creation of necessity.
Hello, governor.
Bob's your uncle. But Sila, does that answer your question as to that?
Not quite, but it's okay. I'm still a little bit I'm still a little bit confused, but that's part of my nature to be confused.
No, it is confusing. That line is one of the most confusing in the entire movie because she could have said, "No, I didn't love the governor. I loved you. I got to know the real you, and I love you." But she didn't say that. She just accepted what he said and didn't respond. So, I mean, ultimately, again, I feel it was her choice to not go with Crichton. Crichton, said, "Look, this is the way things are now." But she could have fought for him. When he said that, that was a perfect moment for her to say, "No, that's not true. What we have is real and eternal." But she didn't. She just accepted what he said.
I I
And
I, I agree, and that reminds me of another section to mention that on one side we're talking about class, and this film is actually about class, but also about gender, and it is not allowed for her to express her real opinion. She's a woman, which re- the reason I'm saying that is because what you just said reminded me of the moment where she dives from very high up, and when he says to her, "You shouldn't have done that," she says, "Is that an order?" And he says, "No," and that she's full with joy because that is not an order. She's expecting orders. That's what she knows. Not only people are under her, but she's a woman and she's expecting orders. When he says no, it's not an order, she feels closer to him, and that's when everything starts really developing. So um, I think it's very very complex to just say one way or another, especially when it comes to Crichton, and especially when it comes to Mary, and perhaps also to when it comes to the Lord.
Well, I mean, you got to realize women back then, women weren't Boy Scouts, women weren't Girl Scouts. Like, they didn't have the training that men did. Boys grew up knowing how to do certain things, and then girls, unless they were a tomboy, and then there were a few, but that was the exception, not the rule. And then like they grew up becoming maid servants, and like the idea of them like expecting orders is not outside the norm, because they have their role, and it's the man's job to provide all the food and all the water and everything, so they can do what they do with what's in their wheelhouse. So it's the man's job within the hierarchy to provide that. And I think that that's where when I can't, is it Crichton? Crichton, Crichton. I mean, I don't know how to say that.
Yeah, it's Crichton. It's pronounced Crichton.
Crichton. But I mean, like he stood up because he knew how to provide the hierarchy to make civilization work.
Well, and one of the better things that the film did was cut out his monologues about nature from the play. Because a very very smart decision for Gilbert when he was adapting it, because we see what Crichton's view of nature is time and time again throughout, but he had there's one that goes almost a page and a half, long speeches of how the social breakdown in nature is long before they get onto the island. So he has this set idea, which of course then when it comes to fruition on the island is kind of undercut by the fact that you had Crichton already explain it to you in the play, whereas in the film we actually see that develop, and we have come to know Crichton and his views on things just enough through the bits of dialogue for us to get the same point, which is also, I think, a difference between theater and cinema, because you can establish things visually that you can't on a theater set. But I think that's one of the more genius things of this adaptation is we get that point without somebody having to turn to the audience and say, "This is exactly what this means."
I'm getting to the point where I would probably like to see that play.
There is a version of it on YouTube that I saw. I didn't check out the quality of it, or if it's just a a local production or a high school production or what have you. But I did see that the play is on YouTube. There's also an audio book of it on anywhere where you get your podcast. Anything that's out of copyright, you can find an audio book of it if you just want to hear the play. But I will tell you, it's thick. It's because of all of the descriptions that Berrie puts, of what his character's motives are, and what the sets mean, and what this means, and what that means. It's not a fun. It's not if you go to the audiobook it's not a fun read, for lack of a better phrase, or listen that way, because you're going to have to listen to a lot of J.M. Berrie saying, a character getting out of bed because of something that happened 10 years ago that you don't actually, that has nothing to do with the play.
No, that would be fine with me. That's just a different medium, a different genre, different perception of a culture.
Well, I'm going to bring this room to a close because we did.
Well, I just to follow up on what you said, I just went on Amazon. A bunch of Barrie's plays are available in book form. I'm just the first result is the Admirable Crichton, Peter Pan, When Wendy Grew Up, What Every Woman Knows, and Mary Rose. All of those plays are in one book for $15. It is possible to get Barrie's collected works for a very affordable price on Amazon. Also, I just want in case it wasn't crystal clear in terms of the audiobook, I saw that audiobook on YouTube. So you can, even if you just search on YouTube, you can probably find that audiobook at no charge. That's I just wanted to say that.
And before you close the room, Eric, I would like to say thank you for having me on stage. And the next time you have like review of a movie and it regards Citizen Kane, totally bring me in.
Well, that was an American film, and we focus on UK cinema history. But I'm not actually closing the room. I was just going to ask for closing thoughts, and then do our programming notes for next week. So I do want to just do a once around closing thoughts on the Admirable Crichton, and this would also be if you've seen something that you want to recommend in a different medium, or even if you like try to food stuff, or anything that you'd like to recommend, now would be the time. And also if you have anything that you want to plug, this is the time to plug away at any of your social media, or anything that might be going on in Clubhouse, such as the Aristophanes poet. We'll start with hi.
Well, okay. Well, just to follow up on what I said, because I looked a little further. The book that I said is $15 of Barrie's plays. that's for the paperback version. But if you're cool with Kindle, it's $9.99. So it's super affordable. I'm gonna go for the Kindle version myself because that's I think that's a fantastic value, and I think it'd be interesting to read his play because Eric's complaining about like the stage directions, but if you're reading, you can very easily skip over that stuff. Um,
Oh no, they're fun. They're fun. Don't skip over them. They are
okay.
hilarious. They are hilarious. I'm not complaining. I'm saying that they're difficult, but they're fun. It's just hilarious how detailed they are. That's all.
Okay. Um, and actually, oh yeah, if you want to even go cheaper than that, um, the Admirable Crichton by itself is available on Kindle for 99 cents. So it's extremely available for anyone who wants to read the original play. Um, in terms of plugging, I guess I want to thank I want to thank Sila, Doc, and Kathy for coming on stage and participating in today's discussion. I want to thank Eric, as always, for kindly hosting this room and making this house um, uh, available in the first place, and for picking what again is one of my favorite movies of all time. Um, I I think we um, you know looked a little closer at how complex it is and how it raises um, questions that are really hard to answer, but are worth asking and worth thinking about. So I'm uh, again, I'm very grateful to Eric always for doing this room. I'm especially grateful today for picking a movie that is really close to my heart. And thank you to thank you so much to Elena for coming and listening so patiently. Elena, you're always extremely valued and appreciated. So thank you for being here. And thank you to everyone else who came in the audience throughout. We appreciate everyone who is part of this room.
Yes, better late than never, Ivy. We love you too, Ivy.
Thank you, Hi. It's been nice.
Sila, last thoughts on the Admirable Crichton and plugs or recommendations?
I would say that as much as I find very important and uh, inspiring to discuss and converse about these films, at the same time, I'm very delighted to take them for what they are. Just that piece of film with its acting, um, its story, and without dissecting it, I just thought of that on one side I really enjoy and need to be part of discussions like this ones, but also uh, wanted to mention the appreciation of just enjoying a good piece of cinema, and that is definitely a great film. Like I said, one that I had never seen before, and I must repeat my appreciation for being forced once more to watch a film that I would have never seen. I not because I refuse to see other films, but because I'm so filled with other things that I need to do. But because of Eric, I end up watching films that otherwise I probably would have never seen. So thank you very much, and of course, always to everyone listening, Ivy and Yelena, thank you for your contributions, and I really enjoy this back and forth on views, perceptions of different aspects of the film. Thank you.
Thank you, Sila. and we always appreciate you here. Matter of fact, I made you and Hi admin because I can no longer imagine this room without you.
Thank you. Thank you.
So
Before I,
yes, you've got a phony promotion on Clubhouse. If I had a badge, I'd give it to you.
thank you. No, I just wanted to add, without any dates or anything, just to warn you to get warmed up because I have two different series coming up, and I think you're going to love both of them. One you are very familiar with. His name is Akira Kurosawa, and the other one is less familiar. Nagisa Oshima, who is the director of Merry Christmas, Mr. Lawrence, among many others. But their birthdays are coming up, so
I think a lot of people have heard of In the Realm of the Senses. I think that's a film that if they don't know it, they know it by name.
Okay. But anyway, just get ready because this will start very soon, and I'm so excited about Oshima that I think I will be having about 7 rooms for him. So just warm up.
But it's far less depressing than Ingmar Bergman. So I don't think I'll be complaining.
It's a little bit more colorful than Bergman.
Kathy, last and sexier too. Last thoughts on Admirable Crichton.
Yeah.
Honey, you're in the Matrix again. Try and move around and get a better signal.
I can't help.
Kathy?
That stinks. I've been in that situation. Well, as far as plugs go, apparently our sister room, Understanding Movies, is going to be on hiatus through March. But worry not, we have a March schedule. All 4 films from March have been chosen. We're doing The Elephant Man, director David Lynch, which Sila had also done a room on. Next week we'll be following that the following Thursday with Ken Loach's Kes, which is unofficially part of our British kitchen sink drama, but it has a bit more humor in it than most. But we will definitely be going back to the kitchen sink drama the following week with Carl Rice's Saturday Night and Sunday Morning. The 2 films are connected as they are both productions of Woodfall Films and produced by the great Tony Richardson, who we talked about a lot in our room on The Entertainer. And then we're going to finish the month with, at the suggestion of Hi, David Lean's Dr. Zhivago. So we have a good month going. As far as recommendations go, Jonathan Glazer is somebody who we in this room have talked about quite a bit. We did his film Sexy Beast, which actually I think was the first time Hi joined us. So we have Jonathan Glazer to thank for Hi being such an important part of this panel. But his film Point of Interest is now available on streaming. I actually sent a link of it to Yelena, who watched the film. Highly recommend the film. I don't know if we can do a room on it here because though Glazer is English, the film is in Polish. But now that it is available on streaming, highly recommended. However, if I can get Yazzie back to do like a pop-up room, we might just do a pop-up room on just one of our profiles just to discuss the film because I think it's worth a conversation. But that would be my recommendation, and those are my plugs. Other than that,
Eric, excuse me. Isn't the rule that a UK film is whatever you say it is?
thank you for reminding me of that. And Jonathan Glazer is British. You're right. So yeah, we I don't want to wait until April to do it, though, because I'd like to do it while it's still hot. But the other, of course, problem is I have a free link to it, but I don't know how legal the link is. But at this point, you still have to pay for it. And I try to avoid those. So maybe we'll do kind of a special room, kind of make an exception for it. But yeah, that's a good point, Hi. We could still do it under the British cinema, under my only rule, which is there aren't any.
Yeah. Also, my personal feeling is if what we have to pay is under $5, then I think that should be okay. Frankly, so if it's $20 to rent it, that's different. But if it's like $4.95 to rent it, that's not, or less. That isn't such a huge imposition, it seems to me. So I think that could be a consideration as well.
Okay, you've made my mind up. I'm going to schedule it on not a Thursday, but yeah, we are going to do a room within the next week or so on that. I'll put it on the schedule, and I'm also going to work around other people's schedules to make sure that we've got a bit of a crowd there for it. So let me work on that, and I'll have that up on the schedule by Saturday. But I'm going to have conversations with Hi and Sila about what days would work best for him for that, because that I think that'd be a good room, and also with the Oscar nominations, it might actually attract some attention to this joint. So,
Well, why wouldn't you? I'm sorry. I'm sorry to keep interrupting. This is the last thing I'll say. But if you want to attract attention, why wouldn't you want to attract attention to the regular day and time of a room, which is Thursdays at 5? And you can just put in a schedule and bump up the other movies by week, and that way you're promoting the Thursday at 5 room as well as the house itself. That might be, if you're going to promote, I think it would be good to promote, this is the day and time we meet without fail on a regular basis.
that's a very good point. Hi, you're right. Yeah, you're right. Yeah. Yeah, because consistency is the key. Okay, let's do that next week then. That's enough time, right, for you two to watch the film. Sila, I'll send you the link through a back channel. You can choose to use it if you're not or not. It's a beautiful print of the film, but again, it's on Look Movie, and I don't know if that. They asked for donations. It looks like a legitimate website. I don't know 100% whether they have the right to have that movie there or not. But yeah, let's do that next week then. I'm going to change the schedule, and we'll do the Elephant Man back to back with Sleuth in April, because of course then we'll have 2 weeks back to back of films I know for sure Sila likes.
Okay.
Because of course Sleuth was Sila's suggestion. So yeah, and the Elephant Man in a way was inspired by Sila, because of course he had the David Lynch room, so that'll work. Yeah, so I guess next week will be Point of Interest, directed by Jonathan Glazer. This will be the second film that we've done after Sexy Beast of his, and there will be spoilers.
Hi guys.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Cassie. Now that now that you got a good signal.
My Wi-Fi is awful. So yeah, I just put my thoughts about the film. I think with me growing up, knowing how that society's worked, the confusion will be more like, why are they reacting like that? Why? Whereas I can assume why there's certain things done, or why they're acting in a certain way, or not acting in the expected way. But I was going to recommend Whistle Down the Wind, Red Balloon, and A Night to Remember.
Excellent, Kathy. We will be doing a night to remember for sure. I've never seen Whistle Down the Wind. I will watch it and let you
Oh, it's
know.
beautiful. It's beautiful.
Excellent. I love seeing films I've never seen before on people's recommendations. That's what I live for. But next week we'll be doing Point of Interest from 2023, nominated for 5 Oscars, including Best Director and Best Picture. Bring your A game for that. There will be spoilers for those who haven't seen the film. So watch the film before you come. And on that note, unless anybody's got anything else, we will close this.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, and have a great night. Want to join the conversation? Every Thursday, we record on the Clubhouse app. Just follow the link in the episode description, and you can be a part of our panel.